Nonprofit Council meeting for August. I see we have Carolyn Michaels, our VP of the Chamber. Carolyn, do you want to say a word before we get going with our...
Thank you, Robert. I'd just like to welcome everyone and thank you so much for taking the time to attend this morning's program. I know it's going to be wonderful hearing Dawn speak and the other speakers as well as to what's going on with events. As you know, we're still doing our programming through the chamber. We are not open, obviously, for meetings, and so we're all Zooming. And I don't know how many of you are Zoomed out, but we've become quite astute at doing so. But thank you very much for having this meeting this morning, Robert. Very important. Thank you all for your continued support of the Chamber of Commerce. We're very, very appreciative. So thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Jenny DeBorgia with membership. If you'd like to say a quick word about membership and the benefits of.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Jenny DeBorgia, also with your Greater Fort Lauderdale Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Dawn. This is looking forward to this session. I do oversee membership programs, and we are currently running, we launched it back in June, the 99 for 90. It's basically a trial membership for 90 days, which is 3 months. And it's in response to the current situation, people being very careful as to how they allocate their monies. But you know, we're here and we have had our programs on the calendar since April 1st. So if anyone's interested, my info is in the chat box, and I look forward to this great session. Thank you, Robert.
Excellent. So without further ado, before I hand it over to the fabulous Dawn Reed, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box. I'll help to field them. Dawn already has a list of questions that were submitted. So Dawn Reed, who is the fabulous event director for Winterfest, is now going to facilitate our 4th annual nonprofit partnership forum. So take it away, Dawn.
Thanks, Robert. Good morning, everyone. So nice to see you. Missing breakfast with everybody, but we'll get back to that soon, we hope. I'm really excited to continue this tradition. I think the conversation is more relevant today than it has been any other time that we've done it. So hopefully, you know, Greg Snowden said something yesterday, the day before, and I thought it was pretty brilliant. You know, everybody's looking for the Willy Wonka golden ticket of answers and what to do and how to do it. There's no such animal. So having conversations with each other, I think, is the best way to do it in perspective. And, you know, it's a little different for everybody sitting on this call of how it's affecting your business. So hopefully we'll shed a little light just from a sponsor and event perspective. So I'm going to tell you who we have today, and then we'll get started. So I'd like to introduce Greg Snowden. He's the Vice President and Account Director for Florida Team Blue. He is all things Ford. So all the support in the community that you see from South Florida Ford, Greg Snowden has his hands on it and in it, and a great partner of Winterfest over the years and on our board of directors. So happy to have you today, Greg. Thank you for doing this. And we also have our friend Ben Wesley. Ben is the External Affairs Manager for Broward County, Florida Power and Light. Also a Winterfest board member and supporter, tapping into our own because I know who they are and what they do. So, and I am very excited to introduce Suzanne Neve. Suzanne is the President and CEO for the Florida Festival and Events Association. I happen to be chairman of the board for another week or two of that organization, so have witnessed firsthand the amazing things that's happening on that side of things. So welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for taking the time with us. So this is just a little note for me. I don't think it's all doom and gloom, and I know sometimes it feels that way. We're all in this crazy COVID story together, but everyone's story sounds and looks and feels just a little bit different. So there's a lot to talk about for sponsorship during a pandemic and events during a pandemic. And, you know, Winterfest is living that firsthand every day right now. So some of my favorite people here to talk and tell you their stories. And I'm going to start off the conversation with, I'm going to start with Greg. Tell us where you stand today with sponsorship, with events, and how you're handling things and what that looks like today.
So first of all, thanks for having me. I think last time I had the privilege of speaking to all of you. It was in person at the chamber, and it was under much different circumstances. So we all do find ourselves in this very challenging spot right now with something that feels like it's never ending. And as a planner, you know, in marketing and advertising, your plan usually coincides with a start and a finish. And right now we don't know when this is going to finish. So it does make it a daunting task each and every day as we look to evaluate, reevaluate, reconsider the things that we're doing. We started the year with about 75 events on our calendar, and that can be anything from, you know, a kickoff luncheon with a nonprofit to a 4-day music festival at Sunfest up in West Palm Beach. So right now, as it sits, our calendar has 2 events on it. One is a golf tournament. And of course, we still are excited for the prospect that Winterfest Boat Parade will happen in December. So, you know, I think there's a lot of questions that I've seen that Dawn has shared that I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to answer as we move further into this. But I think from a big picture, just like I feel like many of us are doing in our personal lives, taking each day as it comes, I think that's sort of where we are at right now. Each day brings sort of new challenges and new decisions to make. And we're just assessing each one as they come up. And there's no uniform plan for us to go after and try to figure out all of our sponsorships and how we move forward and how we work with our nonprofit partners as well.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go next to Suzanne. Talk about maybe some of the pivoting and things of where we are as an organization.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dawn. And thanks everyone for being on today and for the opportunity to be here. So our organization, for those of you that aren't familiar, is a membership-based association similar to the Chamber of Commerce, but specifically for those organizations and individuals who either produce larger scale public events, festivals, community events, or supply products and services to those events. So as you can imagine, you know, with the lack of an ability to produce mass gatherings, essentially our industry is completely shut down at this point. So as an organization, we would typically do what the chamber would do. You know, we would do some in-person networking events and educational events. We've completely adapted and moved over to Zoom. We've added some additional Zoom networking events similar to this for our members. We have about 1 a week. Our biggest challenge was kind of thinking about our annual conference, which is typically in August, typically 400 people. And we thought in the beginning, you know, back in March, we would still be okay to do that, but maybe have some, you know, challenges in terms of attendance with the financial implications of shutting down season in March and April. And as things kind of progressed, we realized that may become even more challenging. We are still doing an in-person event next week. It is much smaller than what we would normally do. It is very much socially distanced and masks will be required, but we're thrilled to be able to do something for the percentage of our members that are able and comfortable to attend in person. We completely shifted the focus on the education for that event over to, you know, what planners need to be thinking about with planning events moving forward. So a lot of topics related to risk management strategies and, rewriting site plans and safety plans, and how do we adapt our social media? What do our sponsorship programs look like? Those types of things. And then what we're doing as an organization the following week is a full-scale 3-day virtual event that will allow those who were not able to attend in person to get education from some of the top industry executives actually throughout the country. We were talking about silver linings earlier as a group, and I think for us, one of the biggest silver linings for the virtual is that extended audience. So, we were saying today, y'all have 150 people registered, and normally for an in-person event, you wouldn't have that many. And so such is the case for us for our virtual event. We're able to get speakers that we wouldn't normally be able to get, and we're able to reach a larger audience that way. And so we've been kind of adapting in that sense. I think our biggest role and responsibility that we feel as an organization, and Dawn can speak to this, is just kind of figuring out without our crystal ball, what the future looks like. And as Greg mentioned, it does feel like it changes every day, and sometimes even every minute. I can attest to that as playing an event next week where it feels like things change even every minute for that. And the planner in me really struggles with that. But I think for us really as an organization, trying to set forth best practices, for events that can be done safely moving forward, or what does the risk mitigation process look like in terms of should we even have our event? What are the financial implications even and whatnot as well too. So lots of adapting. I've grown to dislike the word pivot. I know it gets used for all the time, but it's like the buzzword that I can't really stand anymore. So my newer word is adapting. You'll hear me using that frequently, and just kind of, staying on the forefront of what's happening with our members and with the industry in general.
Thank you so much. We're going to come back to some sponsorship dollars in a minute. Ben, tell us what's happening with FP&L and what's your story during this time?
So we're kind of in a unique position, I think. Our community giving has never been about market share. It's always been about being good stewards of the community. And with the COVID crisis, we've actually increased our giving. When in March, when this really kicked in, we gave $100,000 to each of the United Ways in the Tri-County area. And for specifically for their COVID relief efforts, we gave tens of thousands of dollars just in the Broward portion of the territory to food banks that were, obviously being overwhelmed with the need out there. And we also sent tens of thousands across the territory to the Boys and Girls Clubs, dealing with, kids who weren't able to go anyplace else and needed support there. So I'm very proud of what we were able to do there to help respond to the crisis. In terms of our regular sponsorship budgets, we didn't sustain any cuts. Knock on wood, we won't through at least the end of this year. So all of the things that I already had in my budget to sponsor are still there, and we've been, cutting those checks. And a lot of events have had to go virtual, and that's fine, live, virtual, whatever folks are doing, we're still there to support the events that we have in the past. Another thing, just for the chambers of commerce, which are 501c6s, of course, and are not able to get PPP dollars, what we did there to try to assist was we paid all of our dues early. We just accelerated those checks. Usually those aren't due until the middle of the year or end of the year. We paid all our memberships up front. Also for our economic development organizations like the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance. So we're trying to do what we can to sustain the community through this. And, hopefully we will be able to continue to do that as we move forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So now I'm going to stay on the budget part of it. So we talked about where you stand and events maybe on the calendar, but a lot of people want to know, what happens to that budget that you have allocated for this year for things maybe that are not happening? Are you keeping that intact? Because we're all interested in next year and what happens next year for those who maybe have changed or canceled the events for this year and are moving into next year. We want to make sure that we're staying in your budget, or it's only August. There's still a lot happening in the season here, and I know there's a lot of virtual events going on. I'm going to start with you, Greg. Are you considering anything now? What does that look like? What does your budget look like for the remainder of 2020?
So a lot of the money that we, I guess, I would use the term saved through considerable amount of event cancellations has really just been brought back into our budget and is being held. We have not repurposed any of it until this point. And this, what I'm going to share right now, I think will be probably the most important thing that I'll share all day on this call here, is that in my position, typically I am solicited all day long for any type of events you could think of, nonprofits, for-profit. And I will tell you that since the pandemic hit, I have received the least amount of solicitations for events than I have ever before. And I think that's a very profound thing to think about, that we are not being solicited to market, to go to market with events, whether they're virtual or whether they're for next year or 2 years down the road. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there for people to get right now, to get that time with folks like me that under normal circumstances has a stack of proposals on my desk, any day of the week from people looking to partner with us. So, the short answer is we haven't repurposed the funds. We really had a target on Q1 to be able to repurpose a lot of those, but even that seems, still has a little bit of a question mark next to it right now.
Wow, that's pretty profound. And that's, your inbox is going to be flooded in an hour. But, pay attention to that, because I know a lot of the questions are, we're transitioning to virtual and what are we doing? And, I know everybody, including us, when is the right time to start? And that isn't in our questions, but you just answered that. I know we've all been tiptoeing and doing well checks on our partners. Hopefully you're all doing that. And when is the right time? Because this is lasting longer than any of us expected. And you have to move forward if you're doing events or if your fundraising efforts, we all need to meet some sort of budget criteria. So that is a brilliant nugget to take home. Thank you for that. Suzanne, I'm going to go to you. So not where your sponsorship obviously sits, but I kind of wanted to maybe talk about what we budgeted as everybody's got 12 budgets by now, right? So where we scaled down and where we ended up for this conference. And I feel like that's just a hopeful piece for sponsorship requests.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the key things for us when essentially rewriting our budget for this year's conference was really taking a considerable amount of time and surveying our stakeholders and our members. So before we made any decisions at all about what we were going to do with our annual conference, which is by far our largest, funding event of the year, we did different types of surveys, one for sponsors, one for our typical more supplier or exhibitors, and then one for our attendees, and really just kind of went through and asked them, what's going on with you? What are your thoughts on, attending, both from a safety perspective and a financial perspective, and then kind of asking what their feedback would be on a virtual option as well too. Then we collectively took those results. We had a really high response rate on that. About 80% of our typical attendees actually took the time to complete that survey, which was an invaluable tool for us moving forward. So once we did that, we took a considerable amount of time as an organization, both internally from a staff level and then at an executive committee level, and really reviewed what those responses were. From there, we put together a task force, and the task force was kind of comprised of different demographics within our membership in terms of both geography and type of organization. We have everything from cities to nonprofits to individual planners. And that task force met once a week for about 2 to 3 hours for 3 straight weeks. And we just reviewed what our options would be. What if we did this? What if we did that? How would this go? What do we think about this? And in between, internally, we would kind of write up plans. And ultimately then sent that to executive committee and board for final approval. We're very fortunate that our partners at the Hyatt who are hosting us were extremely flexible with us and wanting to still do business with us. So we were able to do that. And so then essentially once that plan was approved by executive committee, along with it came a revised budget. And the way we determined the numbers for the revised budget was essentially based on feedback from the surveys. So we knew X% would be very much interested in attending in person. And it was a very low number, but we went ahead and just budgeted that number and we're comfortable with it. And then based on the responses for the virtual, then also set a separate budget for the virtual. We are in a very fortunate position that the sponsors, and the majority of our sponsors have been with us for 5+ years, understand the value of the organization year round and not just within that one sole event. And we were able to retain all of our sponsors with the exception of one. And the one that we were not able to retain is just purely a financial decision because of the fact that they are doing no business right now and they have every intention of returning in 2021. So we were very fortunate there. We're also fortunate that, so I'll just kind of share numbers with you. Typically we have about 400 at our in-person event next week. We budgeted for 50. We felt that was pretty conservative based on the survey results that we heard back. The count as of this morning is 92. So we're, in a little bit of a better situation than we thought we would be there. For our virtual, we have close to 300 registered right now. So, knowing that number is going to go up with that event being in 2 weeks, we're essentially, hopefully reaching, a larger audience than what we would for the in-person. And I truly feel that a lot of that just has to do with, that constant gaining of feedback from our stakeholders, from our members and our attendees and our participants, from constant communication as things are changing, and also from flexibility. We said from day one that we would make everything risk-free. So if you had to cancel at the last minute for any reason at all, you would receive a 100% refund. We're able to do that because of the partners that we have in place, because they're giving us flexibility as well too. But I guess I would just say there, I think between communication and flexibility, those have been our hugest assets, with planning what we've got going on in the next 2 weeks.
Thanks so much. And I feel like it's so important. So many of you rely on that type of thing. So if you haven't surveyed your stakeholders and, they feel, like Suzanne said, the rate of return on who did the survey, people are sitting at home or, working at a different pace, and they want to be engaged. And so we're asking questions to people that are paying for the membership. We have 700 members statewide, and listening to them allowed us to move forward with this. But not only that, we budgeted under $10,000. Sorry if I'm sharing stuff that I shouldn't.
You're good. I don't care.
And we're upwards of 30. So not only does this make the organization whole, because this is what we rely on to get to the next year, that's no longer in jeopardy. And it was, what would that mean to Suzanne as our president, salary and stuff. So I know everybody on this call is in a similar situation some way, somehow. So the communication between Suzanne and us as an organization to our membership has been, and to our sponsors. And again, bringing it back to that, hopefully you're communicating, not maybe asking, but like Greg said, nobody's asking him. So it's an interesting comment. When we're all looking, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Continue to ask, I think is definitely the message, and figure your stuff out. If it's worthy of doing and you think it's worthy of doing virtually and you believe that, then it's probably worthy of sponsorship too. So Ben, any comments on that? I know you told us where you stand, so not being cut and adding to COVID related sponsorship or giving. Anything to add to that?
Well, I think that people are still asking us, we're still getting, our community partners are still reaching out and asking for assistance. Our budgets, my budget tends to be pretty baked every year. I mean, we find out what our budget is in January of every year. And I plan out most of my spending in advance, so there's not a lot of wiggle room going forward. Most of it, from year to year, in my budgeting tends to be established partners that we work with. I think that towards the end of the year, when we know if because of cancellations or this or that there are some things that aren't going to move forward, in October, we may know if we've got more wiggle room or not. So that's probably a good time to reach out. I would say that we are going to be looking to support things, again, that are very directly COVID related. So I think my advice to organizations is they would be well served when dealing with corporate givers like us, of concentrating their efforts on COVID relief efforts, their fundraising on that specifically. And I know a lot of organizations, aren't really geared to do that, but I think this is a year where the corporate dollars are going to be flowing to relief wherever possible. But I sit on a couple of boards also where we're grappling with these same questions, right? And I think the answer is to really go back to your donor base, your established donor base, and find out what they can continue to do for you. I think it's going to be extremely difficult to bring in new dollars from new sources. So you've got to go back to your regular givers. And I'm sure most organizations have already gone through this exercise, but your long-term givers are the folks that want to see you stay in business. And they are the ones that are most likely to be your greatest support in a tough year like this.
Thank you so much. So this seemed to be a popular question. I'm skipping around from what I sent you, so sorry. How do we stay in your budget for 2021 if our event did not happen into 2020? Is that something, if you've been supporting someone for 1 year or 10 years, how do they ensure, and I don't love the word ensure because that's something you have to do every day. There should be no entitlement to it, but a good partnership. How can we make sure that we are on your radar for 2021 if that budget didn't allocate in 2020?
Is that
right,
for me?
I'll start with, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. We'll start with you, Ben, then Greg, then Suzanne.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in line. I know what my commitments are from year to year, and if something didn't happen, doesn't mean that it's going to fall off. So I don't think that there's any danger, because you didn't have an event. We get it. Things just weren't possible this year.
Right. Okay, Greg.
Yeah, I think I would echo a little bit of what Ben said there, that there is, we're all in this together. We all understand that, the event world, live event programming has basically been paralyzed, and it's up to us to work with our partners and I guess I would say have those discussions, right? Because I think that's another thing that is not happening. Like the events that we were with in March and April and May that have been canceled or postponed, they haven't even started the discussions with us yet about next year. And I think there's two parts to that. One, they maybe don't know if their event is going to happen. If it was me and I was in those shoes, I would be planning my event no matter what, because we don't know what's going to happen with this pandemic. And I would be having those conversations with my partners, because I know that, you know, especially the ones that are long tenured and that are willing to make those commitments, that they'll be there for us, whether we have to, you know, cancel it again for another year or not. So I think it's just have the conversations, have the open dialogue, be nimble, and try to bring something different to the table.
I think that is brilliant, and I hope that everybody takes that away. Don't not ask, because we're all so uncertain we're tiptoeing everywhere because nobody knows what direction to go, but it's the first for everybody. So everybody should really keep that in mind and, you know, do what you do. And we don't know, and the worst case scenario that something does transition to a virtual version if it's possible, but plan your stuff. You know, we don't know when this bubble's gonna pop, but you know, we got a lot of time to plan for next year. So I love that that's your story, Greg, and I feel like that's why everybody's on this call today, to really hear that. That gives hope, you know, that the sponsorship dollars haven't all dried up. We're all just really treading so lightly. We don't know when the right time is, but it sounds like this is the right time. If you don't ask, the answer is always no, and it can't hurt to start the conversation and ask one-on-one your long-term partners how they feel about it. So be sure that you're having those conversations and not afraid. You know, we've been tiptoeing as well, but you know, our sponsors are our friends. We've developed great relationships with them, and you know, it was well checks, but it's, you know, hey, can we have a chat? And they know what that means. You know, we want to have a conversation about sponsorship. So don't be afraid to start that now, hearing what you're hearing. Suzanne, so with you, I know we're not sponsoring, but on the other side of the sponsors, you know, what is it that you're hearing from our network?
Yeah, I think similar to what Ben and Greg mentioned, I think the conversation is critical. It should be critical regardless of whether or not the fact that you're in a pandemic, but especially now more than ever. But I think the other thing as an organization too is really think about and take some time to think about what your assets are, because you may have assets outside of that physical, you know, person-to-person event that you don't realize. And even more importantly, when you're having that conversation with your sponsor, talk about what their goals and objectives are. I mean, Ben mentioned really theirs is just, you know, corporate giving and making sure that, you know, they're doing their part to help out. And maybe you have a program that would line up with that. That's not something you would normally ask about. We have a partner that normally, you know, would support us and would come to the convention, and they wanted to meet, you know, festival planners. And you know, we went to them and said, you know, where are you at? Are you giving or you're not giving? They're like, well, you know, it's a government agency where their budget has not yet been approved. It would normally be approved on July 1. And they said, we're not approved, but we need flexibility. Well, my event's next week, so I obviously am not going to get anything out of them for next week if their budget's not still approved. But I know that in the past, they have other things, marketing objectives and goals that have been important to them, that I can now use our audience to reach those. So we're repurposing and some new programs that we're creating, and they're going to be hopefully, you know, partnering with us on those. So I think just, you know, that constant communication, thinking about what your assets are beyond the in-person point of view that you can offer. And then also just knowing what the goals and objectives of the sponsor actually are. And just because their goal or objective was one thing last year or even last week, it might be completely different now. So keeping those conversations, I think, is critical.
Excellent, thank you. So a lot of discussion on virtual events and virtual everything's from a Zoom, just a meeting, to a happy hour, to a, you know, I've seen stuff in my network of anybody have success with a black tie ball, like a gala of sorts virtually and stuff. So I know that everybody's looking for what they normally do ame. What are some of the things that have proven, I don't know that you know this, but your input on it, because as a sponsor, what would be appealing, I guess, in a virtual sense, that would align with something that you're doing? Greg, I'll start with you.
I think, you know, that question, we're getting that question a lot. We ask ourselves that internally on my team, and then partners that we have been working with. A lot of the nonprofits that we work with, so Autism Speaks, the Susan G. Komen Foundation, they are now moving all of their walks to be virtual events, and they're looking for, you know, our partnership to extend the communication out on that, because we have you know, large resources to be able to do that. So yeah, maybe our sponsorship dollars have come down, but we're using some of our other assets and resources to promote their event. Kind of what Susan was saying, that there is, you know, from an event standpoint, you may have some assets that you know, under normal circumstances, you don't really see the value in them as much as you would selling somebody you know, a 20 by 10 space for an event. So there, I think that, you know, it is a good time to look through what you have under a different lens. And I'll share another thing. So we did a program with our partners at the Florida Panthers, and we created something called the Get In and Give Back. And what we were asking people to do was get in their Ford, because nobody was driving anywhere. Get in their Ford, take a picture, and share it with a custom hashtag that we created. And then we were making a donation for each picture. We were doing a $5 donation back to a nonprofit. And we had 2 different nonprofits that we worked with on that, children's hospitals. So things like that are different, and you know, typically we wouldn't do a program like that right now, not tied to a live event, but it seemed to work pretty well.
Creative. I will say that Greg is one of the most, you know, out of the box thinker, and, you know, nothing cookie cutter. It's great to be able to create something, and there's obviously this time lends itself to be creative and do something you haven't done. So working with a partner to see what they would like to do or could do or would support, you know, you may come up with a brand new something for a revenue stream just by asking. Thanks for that. Ben?
So I think I'm less concerned with what the vehicle is for the fundraising than I am about just trying to get the money to the right people. So at this point, I mean, yeah, I mean, we need to try to be as creative as we can on the events we create, you know, interesting and engaging. But I really just want to be supporting the right causes at this point. So, I mean, I've got some of my, you know, some of the people that are our partners that, you know, because, you know, back to Greg's point, you know, nobody was reaching out on events that had been, you know, canceled or, you know, they weren't telling me what was going on. And so I reached out and said, I don't care what you do, just send me an invoice, you know, because we want to be there to help. You guys can work that out later. Now, having said that, I think that in a virtual environment, the best thing you can do for your contributors is to just splash their logo everywhere, right? I mean, you know, I mean, that's the warm fuzzy that I get, you know, on my side of this is when we see, you know, good recognition for the support we are that we are giving out there. So, you know, get those logos out and make them large. and put them, paste them on your web page, and put them in your emails, and show the love. I think that would serve the 501c3s well.
That's great advice, because we all still have those assets, may not have that live, but like you said, Zoom meetings and things like that, or the participation is greater than it would be with in-person things at this time. So we all still have assets. So you just got to analyze that and what that looks like. Suzanne, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, so, I think, again, it kind of goes back to having the sponsor conversation. We have one sponsor that actually preferred their logo wasn't on anything because they were a little uncomfortable with the fact that they're going through some internal downsizing or whatever the case may be, and more of like the optics on it. Whereas in Ben's situation, it's, kind of the opposite, and they're more corporate giving, so they would want it everywhere. So, again, back to that, but it has to be, I think, a lot of internal conversations there. In terms of, providing value for sponsors for virtual events, there are so many opportunities and so many different types of virtual events that can happen. And again, it's just kind of going back to having those conversations. One of our partners is based in Texas and would normally fly in for our event, and they do custom websites. So for her, they actually increased their sponsorship and are strictly doing the virtual. They took the funding they would have spent on travel, coming to Florida and, basically seeing people at a trade show where it's a little bit more difficult to kind of show off what they do for websites, and more put that back into our virtual instead, because now they're able, through the virtual trade show, through their booths, have people pop into the booth, do direct demos, whereas for the in-person event, if she gets 3 or 4 people to ask for a demo, she's happy. And, now her ROI is going to be even higher. So again, just going back to those conversations and looking at what your assets are, but more importantly, what your sponsor's goals and objectives are more than anything. And more importantly, how they measure ROI. I'm sure for Greg, ROI is measured by how many cars they sell, and you can't always do that if you're not in person, but, has his ROI measurement or metrics changed as well too, or other things to consider when talking to sponsors?
Well, you beat me to that one, because that has been one of the popular questions that were submitted by the registries here, which is, what are the expectations from sponsorship right now? Pricing. So because, feeling like there's not as many impressions and eyeballs on. So how has your approach or look for ROI at this time changed? And what is a consideration? So that's the other part. And I'm going to say, nobody knows what to price right now, but that sounds like it's a conversation with your partner without a preset anything, in my opinion, from what I'm hearing. But ask the question. So Greg, I'm going to start with you on what you're looking for in ROI at this time.
Well, I think because a lot of events have gone virtual, it's challenging to really assess the value of those. We've heard, let's say for a virtual walk for a nonprofit, that, there's 500 people that are signed up, but typically the walk would get 10,000 people live for it. So it's challenging to figure, and then you don't know how many people are going to jump on day of or last minute. So I think it starts with just the fundamentals of what we're all trying to do, which is, on your side for the nonprofits and for the events that are out there, that you're trying to raise money, you're trying to raise awareness for a cause, you're trying to make a difference. And it all starts with the dialogue and having the conversation with your partners or prospective partners, and just getting a feel for what their appetite is for spending money. To Suzanne's point, there's a lot of organizations out there right now that are going through challenging times. I mean, we went through it as well. For Ford, the plants were closed for almost 2 months, and we had no income coming in. So, without all those cancellations to the events that we had, we would be in a really difficult situation financially. So I think it's just having the open dialogue, doing a needs assessment as best as you can, and then trying to craft something for your partners that makes sense. And I think the ROI part, almost falls back over into what Ben is talking about, which is, just doing something good or just being part of something nowadays and keeping your brand or your product out there in the public is an ROI box checker in and of itself.
Great. Ben?
I really have to concur with my colleagues on the panel here. I think that having the discussions with your partners is absolutely the way to go. And Don, I'm going to tell a story about when you first sold me on being a Winterfest sponsor. Basically, you came into my office and we just designed something, right? We designed a sponsorship, and that's even probably more important, in a COVID world. But it's always appreciated when we can work something out with our partners that is a perfect fit for us, right? That was a lot of years ago when we first did that, and our sponsorship changed through time, right? There was a lot of different things that we did as sponsors of Winterfest. At this point, of course, we have the whole junior captain program, which is just a fantastic way to highlight important 501c3s in the community. All of that was custom, right? None of that was off the rack, and so I think maybe that's one of the most important points that from this whole discussion is work with your givers, find out what they need, and figure out how to work together.
I love that story and couldn't agree more, because Winterfest, we pride ourselves in our life is sponsors. We're a not-for-profit as well. I know you see big names attached to us. Those are all sponsorships. Those are all partnerships. We're Winterfest Inc., and we're a not-for-profit, and our whole world revolves just like yours, but we don't get any outside funding. It all comes from partnerships. So everything we do is custom. If you were not doing that before, you should be doing it now. We don't walk in the door with a sponsorship in our hand. We want to listen and hear what their needs are, because one size does not fit all. And what I love most, and it happened with Greg and it happened with Ben and many, many of our other partners, where we started here and they got to know us. And, we're a family. We love each other. We really, really are. And we've grown together. So exactly what Ben said, from where we first started, they weren't even branded in the very beginning. He had a budget and he was in the parade, and, I can remember a phone call. I'm at an ice cream social at my kid's school, and he's like, all right, I only have this. And I'm like, well, we can't do it for free. We're going to charge this. And he's like, all right. So over the phone, as simple as that, working with what he had. And now we have, tripled that amount. And forward, we called Greg Goldilocks in the beginning because he started with one event and just trying to find the perfect fit. And now, all these years later, we're still working together, and there's been ups and downs in budget flow, and we've worked with all of it. And I said earlier, there should never be an entitlement. Don't get so comfortable that you think no matter what, they're there, because on the back end, they have budgets that get cut, and you have to be willing to make those adjustments and not say, we need this. Figure out how you're going to make it up in another way. Keep them, work with them, do whatever it takes, whatever it needs. And I've said this, I think every year that we've done this, don't be a fair weather partner. Our events are in the fall. We talk to our partners year round. Don't just talk to them when you need them. We all have friends like that we don't love, be a good partner, be a good steward, pay attention, and treat them like friends. And they deserve that year-round communication. How can we help you? It's not our time of year, but if Greg's doing a program, tell us what it is, we'll share it. You know, we're there year round. And I just think that's an important takeaway. If you don't operate that way currently, you know, if it's COVID that's going to make you think that way because we're having this conversation, then that is a silver lining, in my opinion. So Suzanne, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just echoing that, I mean, that's what we're seeing consistently throughout the industry as a whole and kind of have been, you know, from day one. And I think as an organization and as an industry, we've preached that for, you know, a long time, you know, just we really shouldn't be having, you know, the gold, silver, bronze, you know, levels anymore. They should all be custom conversations, and it should be a, you know, a year-round discussion and whatnot as well too. So I think you're right on point, Dawn, and you know, completely agree with what Ben and Greg have said on the matter as well too.
I know we're running short on time, and I'm really trying to hit, you know, this is a question, I don't hear it a lot, but I do hear it. And I guess it depends on where you are in your maybe career. There's a lot of competition out there. We're all in Broward County, most of us that are on this call, right? So we're all looking for the same dollars. So the question was, how do we not cancel each other out? There's plenty to go around. We've proven that. This is one of the most philanthropic areas, Broward County, and everybody has a worthy cause. So some you hear a lot about, some you hear a few about, but we all have our own following. So it's not really about that. Make whatever you do worthy, and people are going to buy in. You know, sell your brand, sell what you have, what your cause is, and who you're serving. Don't worry about somebody else getting a bigger piece of the pie, because they may have more to offer, but there's a lot of pie to go around. I mean, there really, really is. Some of the questions that I may not get to, I thought were a little more for peer-to-peer, you know, because they're asking, how can you combat donor fatigue during this pandemic? But I feel like that's more a peer-to-peer nonprofit discussion. And Robert, maybe that's something we could do at some point, because an opportunity for all these great people that are doing the same things, looking for the same things, to share best practices. And that's something that we do very well at FFEA. And we've started a lot of peer discussions, because we all may be in the same area, but we don't have an opportunity to sit down and share. We share sponsorship ideas. Hey, who do you have? You know, so that's something that I've gained over the years with FFEA. And don't be afraid to share stuff with your peers. You know, we can't hold everything so tight to the vest because we don't want to give anything up. It's not really how sponsors think. Would you guys agree with that? Ben and Greg and Suzanne? We're not taking something away by an introduction. You know, be a community giver too.
Yeah, no, I think if anything, it's an asset to a sponsor when you are introducing them to another event that you know is a solid event that could, you know, provide them with an opportunity for brand exposure and ROI. So we don't see that way. We say steal away, you know, share away. That's kind of our mission and purpose here as an organization.
And think about this. So we have a partner in LaCroix. I drink LaCroix, love LaCroix, and you know, we went after them for that reason. And it's a good story, kind of like Ben's. We started out at a very small amount, and they've grown with us. And it wasn't even me saying, "Hey, can you kick it up?" They came to me and said, "We want to give you more money." So it doesn't get any better than that, right? But I know their brand, I know their demographic, I know who they're looking for, and I have introduced them to many other events and partners, and they have supported them. And they appreciate so much that I'm bringing something to their table, so they don't have to weed through, you know, hundreds of things. I know exactly what they're looking for, and I'm bringing them a worthy partner. It doesn't affect us. It doesn't take away from us at all. It's just spreading the wealth and spreading the love. In my opinion. Robert, I know we only have 5 minutes. Were there any questions that came through that I haven't seen maybe that we would want to address?
Sure. So yeah, we've got a couple minutes left, but I know this question was for Suzanne. and you had talked about doing a virtual, like an expo or a opportunity for people to have booth space. Can you kind of share about that? What is that platform that you were using?
Yeah, great question. So that's one of the, when we decided to go to a virtual conference, I can't tell you how many hours I spent on researching platforms for that. And certainly there were quite a few tech companies that adapted from what their normal platform would be for a trade show over to a virtual platform. So for our virtual conference in 2 weeks, we're using one platform to basically manage all of our educational content and networking, and then a separate platform for our virtual trade show. The platform we're using is called Event Hub, and I can put it in the chat here. And I can even, when it's available, which it should be available Monday, send that to anybody that wants to see the way that it actually works. But essentially, each partner gets their own virtual booth. They are able to set up their booth with videos, photos, direct links to product purchases. And the one thing that we're most looking forward to with our virtual trade show is we have designated hours within the agenda for the conference for people to go over and visit with vendors in the trade show. The platform has a direct video integration. So essentially, it's very similar to what we're on right now, where if it were my booth, I would just be logged in, and when someone wants to pop in to see me, they would just click on the video camera and they would pop in, and we would essentially be in a room together, you know, as virtually face-to-face, essentially, as we would if we were in a typical trade show environment. Screen shares are able to happen in terms of demos and whatnot. But the one thing that we're really doing to encourage engagement and interaction on our virtual trade show is that if we were in person and having our normal trade show with, you know, 75 booths, we typically would do a fun little scavenger hunt through our mobile app for the event to encourage interaction with our sponsors and vendors. And we are still doing that. But the scavenger hunt is through their virtual booth. So each sponsor gets to pick their activity and their giveaway. And when someone enters the booth, they see what the activity is. And once they complete the activity, they get entered in to the giveaway, and then also entered into a separate giveaway that's run by us for points. So the more points you get, you know, the more chances you have towards earning gift cards and whatnot. One of our vendors says, you know, just stop into the booth and say hello, and then you have to answer a trivia question. The trivia question is, what color shirt is she wearing? She's doing it that way because their company has like a signature, the company name is Sapphire, and their sapphire blue is like their signature color. And if you're the winner of that, you get a gift basket with like a sapphire blue Yeti cooler and a, you know, a sapphire, you know, all kinds of fun stuff. So that's our way of kind of making the trade show a little bit more interesting outside of just what would normally be like a click-in type situation. And I'll put the link in the chat as well too.
And the other thing sorry, Robert, that we talked about, and this isn't something I would probably normally even do here, so hopefully it doesn't offend anybody, but Florida Festival Events Association, you can look that up online and look and see what we're doing. The virtual is not next week, but the following week. And the content is so robust. I mean, I'm so impressed. I had nothing to do with it, all Suzanne. So it's really interesting, and there's you could do it for your whole office. Suzanne was going to offer something to this group as a code, but if you want to go look at the content, Florida Festival Events Association, you can see what's on tap that we're doing in this time. Suzanne, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So I'll put the link for this in the chat as well too, with the schedule, and so you can see the speaker lineup. But it's essentially, you know, how to run safe. There's probably about 60% of the content is, you know, adapting your event in, you know, in times of pandemic and what we'll even need to do post-pandemic to adapt. And then the rest is kind of just general, you know, like how do you write your sponsorship proposals, all the way to, you know, what social media campaigns should look like and whatnot as well too. But when we, circling back to kind of our task force and our survey research, what we discovered was that if we were to offer a rate that would allow more people in the office to participate, and more people than what they would normally send to the in-person event, that we would have a higher attendance. So we have one rate for just an individual to participate, and then another rate for just $100 more that includes your entire office. So everyone gets their own unique login and password. And so if you have a sponsorship person, they can go to the sponsorship sessions. A marketing person can go to the marketing, so on and so forth. So I will also put a discount code in the group chat as well too, if anyone's interested in participating in that. I'll put the link to the schedule and then also the discount code in there too.
And we will be doing another. So typically in the last few years, I've organized this one. I was so excited and honored to have been asked to do this 4 years ago. And we have, I also do one for FFEA. So Greg will be on that panel with us, and we have Southwest Airlines, and we have Coca-Cola, who does the large scale events. So just to hearing the state of some of the larger companies too, that, you know, we're all reading about and how their industries are affected. So excited about that. So that'll be in the virtual, not the live. So again, I'm only mentioning it because I feel like the content is very rich and relevant, you know, for this group in different ways.
So we are going to do a additional 30 minutes opportunity for more question and answer. But before we go into that, and before I know some people may have to leave, I want to make a couple announcements. So first, I want to thank Dawn and our panelists for participating today and helping us, because it's a crazy world out there, and we're all struggling and trying to do the same things. And many of our big events have been canceled, so we're having to adjust, because I hate the word pivot as well. I love Suzanne. We're having to adjust. I also want to thank and acknowledge Dolores and Mike from the Chamber. Dolores is our staff contact for the Nonprofit Council, and Mike, who has been doing all of the magic behind all of the events that are going on at the Chamber. So I want to acknowledge him and thank him. So, so Dawn, thank you again for putting this together. And if just a reminder, in the September meeting, we are going to try to go back to our original format when we were actually all together. So if you're interested in doing a 5-minute presentation, please email me. I've put my information in the chat, and we'll see how that goes for September. And if not, then if it doesn't work out, then we'll go back to doing more panels like we did for June, July, and August.